Welcome to another interview. I'm Pete Bakins, Chair of Gamification Europe, and I'm delighted to have with me today Andrzej Marczewski. He was, in fact, the first person we invited to be a speaker at this year's Gamification Europe because of our theme of projects and players. And there's something about Andrzej that says players could be on his topic and right up his street. But hi, Andrzej, welcome.
Hello, yes, thank you. And first to be invited, probably last to respond to your request for an interview. But hey, organisation was never my thing.
That's not what we want you. As long as you turn up at the right time, we're good.
I mean, yeah, all right.
So look, for those who don't know Andrzej, let's hear a bit about your background, how you came to work with games and gamification.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that goes back a little bit. So I started in gamification world around about 2011-ish, and kind of happened upon it. I'd always used games, always been into games. So games have been part of my life since I was a small child. My dad played video games with me on his Mac, Apple II and all this sort of stuff. So I've always had games around, and then I've always used games as part of the way that I design and build things. I've been a web designer for years and years before kind of more recent consultancy. So I'd always done stuff with games. And around about 2011, I decided to be a blogger. Everyone was blogging in 2010, 11. And I was blogging about social media. And then someone at work, actually at Capgemini, said, hey, have you heard about this thing, gamification? We got a guy called Gabe Zickerman coming in to talk to us. Seems like it might be up your street. So kind of looked into it, realized it was exactly all the things I'd ever done in my life, all in one place. And kind of just went from there, really. Started writing about it, getting involved with it, working in it, writing more about it, speaking about it, doing it, and kind of haven't ever really stopped. I'm not directly involved in the industry anymore, but I've never really stopped contributing and kind of doing stuff around the industry because I just love the whole principle and concept of it. A very quick, short intro to what is a many years of struggle to get the industry up and sort of recognized with people like you, sort of all of us at the forefront pushing things along in Europe, especially.
I think that was a really good short intro to how you got into it. And
don't forget your very first. Sorry, I've just seen Bernardo. Hello, Bernardo. So your very first book, yeah, was a Gamification: A Simple Introduction, one of the worst books on gamification ever written. And I still get references it to this day.
I think one of those interesting things about you is that like your work has been used for a lot of gamification projects. Like I don't even have to reach far for a copy of like one of your books.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So look, in fact, actually, tell us a bit about the book. And am I right in thinking you've just relaunched it with a new name or something like that?
Oh yeah. So this is a very marketing-y thing. So it is relaunched with a new name. I think I've called it the Gamification Design Handbook, only because I was talking to someone about it, and they were saying one of the things that put them off buying it was it looked silly. Now, that was part of the point, and I'm sure we'll come on to the whole point of why it's called Even Ninja Monkeys Like to Play. But they were right. It was, I suppose, part of me not being as directly involved in the gamification world anymore. I wanted to kind of have a slightly more mature look at the book. So it's not, I haven't done much to it, but yeah, rebranded it slightly for a different generation of gamification people. But it's the same basic content as the Unicorn edition. So in fact, other than a few words, it's pretty much identical.
Who do you want to be reading it this time around?
Anyone who has a passing interest in the psychology of games and play and how it can be used in business. And I think that's it's a very different audience these days, I think, to what we were doing before. Before it was people who thought they understood what that actually entailed versus people who actually knew what was entailed. And now I think there's a bit of a shift in people have a better understanding of it and then are much more jaded towards it now. So it's kind of that wave of excitement where, that whole whatever it is, the curve thing they talk about. The
hype
hype cycle, that's the one.
Yeah.
And I think we crashed out of that and kind of got lumped into lots of other things. So my view was, if I can get more people to read it because it doesn't look like it's meant to be silly, it might influence more people to do things the right way. Was the thinking behind it, and also it made it easier to sell a few more copies. I'll be honest.
Well, I mean, I think calling it a handbook's a good idea, because that's basically what your book is. So,
yeah, that was the idea of it. It was something that anybody could kind of dip into, read about, understand what was in there, and learn as much as they wanted to. You know, there's a lot of stuff in there that is a little bit philosophical, should we say. There's a little bit in there which is very opinion based, but there's a lot of stuff in there which was at the time especially very heavily researched, very science backed, and hence it's used and referenced so frequently in scientific papers now and research.
Well, I was going to say to any of our viewers who don't know, I used to teach gamification. I still teach it in some places, but I ran a gamification module at university, and we made this one of the 2 core textbooks.
Yes, and very grateful I was to you. And actually, that does bring me to the title, the original title of Even Ninja Monkeys, because that was purely, the book originally got written because people were struggling to reference the gamification hexad, which we'll speak about in a moment, I'm sure. And they wanted to use it in research, couldn't reference it, so I wrote a paper. Paper got turned down because it already existed as a blog, but they couldn't reference the blog because it wasn't a paper. So I spoke to some people in research, and they said, well, if it's in a book, we can reference it. So kind of the book originally evolved around that. And then the reason it was called Even Ninja Monkeys Like to Play was to basically upset researchy people that have all these very nice scientific kind of headlines and references, and then Even Ninja Monkeys Like to Play. It just amused me at the time.
You had some fun with it. That's cool.
This is it. Yeah, it's all about that. You know, fun is intrinsically part of what we do as gamification designers and experts and the like.
Now, you briefly mentioned the hexad there.
Yes.
So that was my next question for you. So one of the key bits of work, in my opinion, that you, as well as the book that you've brought to the gamification industry, is a way of what would you call it? What's it for? What's the hexad?
It depends who you ask. I've been told my interpretation of it's wrong on numerous occasions, which I find quite funny. For me, it was a way of organizing the way I think about people in gamified environments. That was the point of it. I write things down to organize my brain because you know me, I'm all over the place, and so I need to write it down to kind of make it concrete. And so what I did was I was working with Bartle's player types, and I love Bartle's player types, and they're great from MMOs. Problem with it is, you talk in a business and you say to them, right, well, we're going to get a group of killers into the system, and kind of the C-suite goes, I'm sorry, what now? And it becomes a very awkward conversation because you start describing psychopaths. So I thought I needed to do something a bit different to that, so I started working on the hexad, and it kind of evolved from that need of, we needed something in the gamification world that was purely focused on how gamification, especially at the time, was being made, and try almost be anti that, actually think more about the motivations rather than about the rewards and kind of points and badges, which was so, I think it still is, but then was so big in the industry.
Yeah, very true. So you came up with the hexad, like it's your thoughts, organized. And from what I've seen over the years, obviously it's developed. It's been part of some academic research. Like, it's not just your thoughts. Can you tell us a bit about how it's progressed?
Yeah, so it went from, I don't want to give too much away because part of this will be in my talk in December, but it did go from a thought experiment to direct plagiarism of Bartle plus a few bits to, yeah, this bit doesn't work, this bit does. And then research into things like self-determination theory, helping to bolster what was behind it. Now, yeah, it evolved. It's at one point there were, I think there were about 16 types at one point. It went down to, started at 4, went to 16, came back down to 8, then went to 6, and officially there are 12, but I don't use them because that's too complicated. Again, kind of that was more just to complete it. And then Gustavo, I never get his surname right, Tondello, and Leonard Knack. There were other people who researched it. MIT were using it for certain things, and then these two came along and said, we're going to do some work with this. I've created a like a survey thing, because everyone had to have a survey and you had to get types, and the Bartle quiz was always very popular. So I did one for us, and they said, we're going to take that and do something proper with it. We're going to get some real research behind it, and we're going to create a referenceable version of this quiz that will give you a type that we can trust is right. So they went away and did that, and that kind of opened the door to other researchers just going crazy with what they could do with it and what they were going to use it for. So it was, other people had used it. Barry Herbert was a guy who was the first person I knew who did a PhD, and my Hexad was the core of his PhD, which is fantastic. But yeah, those two were the guys who just sort of ran off with it, and really it took on a life of its own with them for a number of years.
Yeah. So this is good. So I've got 2 questions. One, I hope won't give away too much of your talk. And so that's like, can you tell us about some gamification projects you've seen your work used in? Because I personally, obviously I've used it myself, as you're aware. I find it a very practical way to look at the users and the players and how we can design for them. But what have you seen? I'm sure people feed back to you.
Yeah, I said there's a lot of research, a lot of trying to use it to figure out how to automatically manipulate gamification kind of mechanics based on what user type they are, so they have different experiences. I've used it personally in projects in previous companies. I've just spoken about at other events. I think it's weird. I do know what it's being used for. I do kind of look out for it. I have a vanity search on Google that tells me when I must research, purely because I'm trying to make sure that it's not being used badly, if that makes sense, because there are a lot of people who kind of go off and do weird things. The one that caught my eye, and I wish I could remember who it was, and I will look into this, and I apologize for if they do hear this. It was being used to research how to use games to help teenagers with depression, and that's the sort of stuff that I've seen it used for quite a lot. I've seen it used for travel. I've seen it used for banking. I've seen it used for just general educational gamification. A lot it gets used in educational gamification, but this one really caught my eye because it was this blue rabbit. Sorry, yeah, all right, Bernardo. The nagging in the background.
So that used it. Yeah, okay.
But this one caught my eye because it was one of these moments where, when you're looking at, sounds really weird, when you're looking at legacy, things you're going to be remembered for. Obviously, I'm very lucky. I've done stuff that is going to be remembered in the industry. I was lucky. I did the right thing at the right time, and people liked it. But when you start to see people using it for research to help teenagers with depression, for me, that's like a massive, like, oh wow, okay, this is important. Sounds braggy, but it feels important suddenly because it's really something that it's not just making people more money. It's not just kind of encouraging people to do more of an activity. It's helping, and that for me, when I see research like that and it being used there, that's when I kind of my attention is piqued more than I said. There's lots of other things it's been used for, but that sort of thing really gets my attention.
That's cool. I can't name names, but I've seen it used in a couple of client projects, or that I've been tangentially involved in, where they've done things like use the Hexo player types and maybe as a selection option when someone starts using the app, playing the game, to then design a journey for that player type. So depending on how you enter into the app, you get a different experience. All designed.
And that is a great use for it. The only downside, and we've spoken about, your motivations change over time. So that initial entry point won't necessarily be right 3 months down the line, which is also part of, you asked me at the beginning, how do I use the types personally? I don't use them for that. I use them as a series of questions for myself. What's in it if I am a socializer? What's in it if I am an achiever? Rather than, and conversely, I want to encourage achiever-like behavior. How do I encourage that based on what I know about those types? So it's either what's in it for that player, or how do I encourage more behavior that fits that player type, rather than you are player type X, Y, and Z, here's your experience. Only because that's really hard compared to building an experience and then sort of thinking about how that encourages particular behaviors. Is much easier than saying, I'm going to build an experience for all 6 types, and they're going to have mix and match mechanics as they go through to do stuff. If you can do it, brilliant, very clever, all power to you. I can't. I'm not that clever. Or I've never had a client with enough money to do it.
No, I think you're right. The other way I've used it is to find the gaps. Like, has someone, if this is the type of audience they've got, have they actually got enough game elements, game mechanics of the right type for that type of player? It's very simple. It's a good double check.
If you want someone to behave in a philanthropic way within your gamified app, are there any mechanics that encourage that? If not, they're not going to do it. It's quite, you say, it's actually a very simple way of looking at it, but it becomes very powerful, because then you have the whole thing, well, these mechanics work really well. Periodic table thing I did a while back, and the research that has been done. Here are mechanics that then fit with those types of player. Therefore, if we aren't encouraging it, we can add these in, start encouraging it. Not quite that simple, but that's the basics of it.
It is indeed. I mean, this segues nicely into the title of your talk for our conference. Your talk's titled "Think of the Players." Everything we've been talking about is about the players. So, my plan is for your talk to be the intro to the day. It's going to set the scene, because everything's about the projects and the players at this one.
Yeah, looking forward to that.
Can you give us a little bit of insight into what we can expect from your talk?
I mean, you could. I haven't written it yet, but no. I mean, the reason you actually spoke to me, you said, this is what the 2 days is going to be about. This is what we're really thinking about, and that was the first thing that came to mind. Think about the players, or think of players, because what I want to talk about is a little bit around about how player types, in my mind, came to be within the gamification world, how the Hexad came to be, but more about why and how. So why is it important to think about it? Well, we know it's important to put the user at the center of an experience, but users aren't all the same. So how do we split those users apart and think about them through different lenses? How do we have that idea of, as I said, if I am a socializer, what is there in this experience that is going to encourage me to engage with it and keep me engaged? And I think, the message for people who listen to the talk will really be, it can't just be about what you want and about what your client wants. Sounds really awkward when you put it that way. And in the world that I'm in now, I say this to my customers a lot. You can't just think about what the business wants, and you can't just think about what you want, and you can't just think about what the client wants, what the customer wants, because there's a bit in the middle where it all crosses over. The Venn diagram, somewhere in the middle is what's going to work for everybody. But you can't do that unless you start from the person involved and almost work backwards towards the business objective, because otherwise you're never going to do something that engages people. So that's kind of the crux of what I'll be talking about, is why that's important, how I've done it in the past, how I think people can carry on doing it, using Hexad, whatever it may be. There are other types out there, BBC kind of regulations. There are other player types available. Mine better. And also the user types, not player types, but that's a whole other story. But yeah, that's kind of what you're going to get from it, is how it came to be, why I think this is an important principle to understand, and how to apply that. Essentially, how you can have that lens whatever other talks and experiences you have during those days, how thinking about it from those lenses can help you get more from each of those talks, each of those workshops, and how it can really help you to think beyond the borders of I think, we think, they think. It's actually player thinks.
I like that. One of the things I liked about what you said a minute or so ago was actually you're not going to achieve your business objectives unless you think about the player. That's what you boil it down to.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
there are lots of competing. There's a lot of competing pressure when you build anything. You know, I'm in e-commerce now more than anything, and I look at conversion optimization, that kind of thing. And one of the things I'm often saying to customers is, the business is going to tell you one thing, the user is going to tell you another, and the truth's in the middle. Because I can improve your conversion rate by making everything on your website 1 pence. Your conversion rate's going to go through the roof, your profit's going to go through the floor, and your business users won't be happy. Your boss is going to be really unhappy with you, but your customers will be ecstatic. So you can't. So I'm thinking about
we didn't let Andrzej set our ticket prices.
Yeah, exactly. So from the customer perspective, it's great. The business, not so much. So it's that you do have to start from the customer, but you also then do eventually need to work back towards your actual goals and see where that sweet spot in the middle is.
That's cool. So just to double check, like who do you think who will get the most from your talk? What type of role the people are in?
Honestly, I think anybody who's doing anything around behavior change programs, gamification, e-commerce, whatever it may be, anybody whose role touches the end user's engagement in some way, I think could benefit from this, because that's the whole point of it. It's meant for everybody to be able to understand a little bit more about why people do what they do, and how you can think about it from their perspective, and how you can use that to improve whatever your engagement strategy might be. Whatever, it doesn't have to be gamification even. It can be anything. I use all of this stuff now completely outside of the world of gamification, because essentially everything we do when we're in our kind of role or in an e-commerce role is behavioral change. We're looking to change behaviors in some way. Sometimes it's for the gain of the person, sometimes it's for business, sometimes a combination of both if you're lucky. And I think anybody who's involved in anything that touches a user or a customer can benefit from this way of thinking. So hopefully everybody who's there should get something from it. Anyone who's not there should think about going, because it's going to be an interesting few 2 days, whatever my thought may be.
That is my next question. It's like, what would you say to someone thinking of attending Gamification Europe? We've got 10 days left for people to get their tickets at a reasonable price before the last chance pricey ones. What do you say to them? I
think why you should attend it, or who, or
what would you say to them?
What would I say? If you are thinking about it, do it. There's no point not doing it, because you're going to learn something. I've been to a lot of these events, and I'm always arrogant about this. Oh, I've got nothing to learn. I was there at the beginning of the industry. I always learn something. There's always someone cleverer than me in the room, And I think if you want to be in a room, they always say you shouldn't be the cleverest person in the room. Otherwise, you're in the wrong room. And I think that's one of the things I've always loved about these conferences. I never feel like the cleverest person in the room. And that's amazing, because, when you've been in an industry for a very long time, and people do, you and I have the same thing. People come up to us and go, oh, you've been around for ages. That's great. But there are people coming into the industry who know way more than I will ever know about what we're doing, because they've done more learning. They've come into it from a different angle. So if you're thinking about it from that perspective and you have anything to do with gamification, be there. Now, if you're thinking about it and you're not even thinking about it, you've got nothing to do with gamification whatsoever, still go, because the behavioral science behind what real gamification is applicable to anything. It doesn't need to. You don't have to think about game mechanics. You don't have to think about fun and video games, blah blah blah. And if you do anything that touches behavior, marketing, e-commerce, training, education, anything, pretty much anything that involves dealing with other people, you'll get something from it. It may not be from every talk, but I reckon a good half of the talks will teach you something you didn't know before you walked in through that door.
That's cool. I'm going to say 100% of the talks, but then I know what they all are going to be.
And also, like I said, you can't be, you can never go in. I always have medium expectations because then I'm always blown away by what happens. So I say 50% because that way, when I learn something from every talk, I'm even kind of like more, yeah, fantastic. This has been great. I think it, but then I'm a pessimist. I always have been. I'm a pessimist, so I'm never disappointed.
Gotcha. Well, in that case, with your expectations so low, I know you're going to have a great day. Whatever.
Now, I know it's going to be fantastic. I've been to enough of your events to know that these things are always interesting. And like I said, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, you're going to learn something. You're going to find something out that's interesting. And you're also going to meet really nice people. You know, the gamification industry, although it's not mature yet, I still say we've got a few years to go. It's getting there, though. You know, it's hit its teenage years. Everyone tends to be really nice. We're all trying to do the same thing. We all want to do the same thing. We all think we're all nerds. You know, we all come from gaming backgrounds usually, or science backgrounds. So we're all geeks and nerds. So we all kind of get on. And I think you'll see and meet nice people and you will learn interesting things. So it's pretty much win-win as far as I'm concerned.
Well, that sounds fantastic. Look, I'm conscious I've taken up loads of your time because it's been a really engaging chat.
That's all right. I actually have a day off today. So remarkably, I'm not running around doing stuff.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Andrzej. Look forward to seeing you in London in a few weeks' time. And
so am I looking forward to catching up with you, friends?